Hi. Today we're going to read in Stuart Little. This is chapter 7, The Sailboat Race. When the people of Central Park learned that one of the toy sailboats was being steered by a mouse in a sailor suit, they all came running. Soon the shores of the pond were so crowded that a policeman was sent from headquarters to announce that everybody would have to stop pushing. But nobody did. People in New York like to push each other. The most excited person of all was the boy who owned the Linen Womrath. He was a fat, sulky boy of 12 named Leroy. He wore a blue serge suit and a white necktie stained with orange juice. "Come back here," he called to Stewart. "Come back here and get on my boat. I want you to steer my boat. I will pay you $5 a week and you can have every Thursday afternoon off and a radio in your room." "I thank you for your kind offer," replied Stewart, "but I am happy aboard the Wasp, happier than I have ever been in all my life." And with that, he spun the wheel over smartly and headed his schooner down toward the starting line, where Leroy was turning his boat around by poking it with a long stick, ready for the start of the race. "I'll be the referee," said a man in a bright green suit. "Is the Wasp ready?" "Ready, sir," shouted Stewart, touching his hat. "Is the Lillian B. Womrath ready?" "Womrath ready?" asked the referee. "Sure I'm ready," said Leroy. "To the north end of the pond and back again," shouted the referee. "On your mark, get set, go." "Go," cried the people on the shore. "Go," cried the owner of the Wasp. "Go," yelled the policeman. And away went the two boats for the north end of the pond, while the seagulls wheeled and cried overhead, and the taxicabs tooted and honked from 72nd Street, and the west wind, which had come halfway across America to get to Central Park, sang and whistled in the rigging and blew spray across the decks, stinging Stewart's cheeks with tiny fragments of flying peanut shell tossed up from the foamy deep. "This is the life for me," Stewart murmured to himself. "What a ship, what a day, what a race." Before the two boats had gone very many feet, however, an accident happened on shore. The people were pushing each other harder and harder in their eagerness to see the sport. Although they really didn't mean to, they pushed the policeman so hard they pushed him right off the concrete wall and into the pond. He hit the water in a sitting position and got wet clear up to his third button of his jacket. He was soaked. This particular policeman was not only a big, heavy man, but he had just eaten a big, heavy meal, and the wave he made went curling outward, cresting and billowing, upsetting all manner of small craft and causing every owner of a boat on the pond to scream with delight and consternation. When Stewart saw the great wave approaching, he jumped for the rigging, but he was too late. Towering above the Wasp like a mountain, the wave came crashing and piling along the deck, caught Stewart up, and swept him over the side and into the water, where everybody supposed he would drown. Stewart had no intention of drowning. He kicked hard with his feet and thrashed hard with his tail, and in a minute or two he climbed back aboard the schooner, cold and wet, but quite unharmed. As he took his place at the helm, he could hear people cheering for him and calling, "Atta mouse, Stewart, atta mouse." He looked over the wave and saw the capsized Lillian B. Womrath, but she had righted herself and was sailing on her course close by, and she stayed close alongside till both of the boats reached the north end of the pond. Here Stewart put the Wasp about, and Leroy turned the Lillian around with his stick, and away the two boats went for the final finish line. "This race isn't over yet," thought Stewart. The first warning he had that there was trouble came ahead when he glanced into the Wasp's cabin and observed that a barometer had fallen sharply. That can only mean one thing at sea: dirty weather. Suddenly, a stormy cloud swept across the sun, blotting it out and leaving Earth in a shadow. Stewart shivered in his wet clothes. He turned up his sailor's blouse closer to his neck, and when he spied the Wasp's owner along the shore, he waved his hat and cried out, Dirty weather ahead, sir. Wind backing to the southwest. Seas confused. Glass falling. Never mind the weather, cried the owner. Watch out for the flotsam dead ahead. Stewart peered ahead into the gathering storm, but saw nothing except gray waves and white crests. The world seemed cold and ominous. Stewart glanced behind him. Behind him, there came a sloop boiling along fast, rolling up a bow wave and gaining steadily. Look out, Stewart. Look out where you're going. Stewart strained his eyes, and suddenly, dead ahead, right in the path of the Wasp, he saw an enormous paper bag looming up on the surface of the pond. The bag was empty and riding high, its open and gaping wide like the mouth of a cave. Stewart spun the wheel over, but it was too late. The Wasp drove her bow straight into the bag, and with a fearful whoosh, the schooner slowed down and came up into the wind with all sails flapping. Just at this moment, Stewart heard a splintering crash and saw the bow of the Lilian plow through his rigging and felt the whole ship tremble from stem to stern with the force of the collision. A collision, shouted the crowd on shore. In a jiffy, the two boats were in a terrible tangle. Little boys on the shore screamed and danced up and down. Meanwhile, the paper bag sprang a leak and began to fill. The Wasp couldn't move because of the bag. The Lilian B. Womrath couldn't move because her nose was stuck in the Wasp's rigging. Waving his arm, Stewart ran forward and fired off his gun. Then he heard above all other voices on the shore the voice of the Wasp owner yelling directions and telling him what to do. Stewart, Stewart, down jib, down staysail. Stewart jumped for the halyards, and the jib and foresail came rippling down. Cut away all paper bags, roared the owner. Stewart whipped out his pocket knife and slashed away bravely at the soggy bag until he had the deck cleared. Now back on your foresail and give her a full, screamed the owner of the Wasp. Stewart grabbed the foresail boom and pulled with all his might. Slowly the schooner paid off and began to gather headway. And as she heeled over to the breeze and rolled her rail right out from under the Lilian's nose, shook herself free and stood away to the southward, a loud cheer went up from the bank. Stewart sprang to the wheel and answered it. Then he looked back. To his great joy, he perceived that the Lilian had gone off in a wild direction and was yawning all over the pond. Straight and true sailed the Wasp, and Stewart at the helm. After she had crossed the finish line, Stewart brought her alongside the wall and was taken ashore and highly praised for his high seamanship and daring. The owner was delighted and said it was the happiest day of his life. He introduced himself to Stewart, and that in his private life he was Dr. Paul McCary, a surgeon dentist. He said model boats were his hobby, and he would be delighted to have Stewart take command of his vessel at any time. Everybody shook hands with Stewart. Everybody, that is, except the policeman, who was too wet and mad to shake hands with a mouse. When Stewart got home that night, his brother George asked him where he had been all day. He said, "Oh, knocking about town," replied Stewart. And that's the end of chapter 7.